Today we're going to be dealing with the back three, and I'm delighted to be joined by some real experts in the playing, coaching and refereeing backgrounds as well, who will help you improve your game. Our aim today is that we want you to be able to go out and watch games in a different way, that you'll analyze the games and that you'll ask questions of yourself of what's happening on the game, what players are trying to do, and that it'll help you develop your game. A lot of development is done on the pitch, but in the moment, it's very difficult to do that. So what we want you to do is to be able to watch games on TV and use that to be able to develop your own game. So the first person we're going to bring in is the player, and the player's point of view. And we're delighted to be joined here by Lauren Delaney, 13 caps for Ireland. She's also a basketball international, and she plies her trade with the Sale Sharks in the Premiership. Lauren, hello, and how are you?
Hi, how are you doing? Good, thanks.
Great, and thank you so much for coming in to join us today. And what we wanted to ask you, I suppose, was as a player, how do you watch games on TV, and what do you get out of it?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. For me, there's probably two elements to why I watch games and how I watch them. I suppose on the one side, you've got the technical, more tactical side where I'm watching games of teams that I'm going to be playing over the next while. So in the Allianz Premiership, we're quite lucky that most of the games are streamed online. So even if the games are at the same time, I can watch them during the week in preparation for to play against some of the teams and the players. So I suppose from that perspective, from a back three side, what I tend to look at and try and learn about these other teams is around their kind of back three positioning on the field. So whether they'll typically play a pendulum, whether they'll drop their 10 in the backfield, whether they'll just kind of have 14 front and a 15 in the back, and at what points of the field will they normally vary that as well, so that in practice later on I can discuss with my 10s and try and work with that in terms of our team. And then I suppose on the opposite side, from a defensive point of view, when I'm watching games, I'm really looking at kind of the 10s kicking game, and are they looking to bring the ball wide and how often, and when the 10s kicking, like what type of kicks do they do, what position, where the backfield are in that as well. I think really challenging thing when you're watching TV, especially in the back three, is that you don't always get that wide view, so you've almost got to stop and pause and count maybe how many players are in the front line. Right, well, they've 13 in the front line, that means there's 2 in the backfield. If I was there in that game, where would I be positionally? And so that's probably the one side of how I watch games, and that strategic side. And the other side is probably a bit more enjoyable, watching a few more of the men's games and looking at maybe more that technical side. So watching some of the lads, so I watch quite a lot of the Sale Sharks lads games, and seeing the likes of your Marlon Yards and your Sam James, and then in the high catches and the high ball, how they catch their positioning, and if they're unlikely to catch the high ball cleanly, how they'll turn their body and tap it back. Line breaks as well as an important one, and when your back three, when they make a line break, what are their options? Do they kick a lot? Do they look down the field? Do they put some footwork? And trying to learn those little technical side of things as well, while enjoying watching the games too. So they'd be the two typical ways that I would watch games.
That's very good. That's fantastic. And I suppose you're the perfect example of a player who watches a game, and rather than just watching the game, looks to analyze the game and what the actions of the players that they're watching. So, you obviously play for Sale Sharks at the moment. Do you get to watch, the other teams, or how often would you be watching matches, whether it's YouTube or on TV, where you have those opportunities to actually to analyze games and try to learn from it?
Yeah, I'll definitely try and watch at least 1 or 2 games of the team that we're going to be playing this weekend. So we've got Gloucester Hartpury this weekend. So I've got 2 games that luckily, as I mentioned, they're all streamed online, or the majority are, or on YouTube. So even if we are playing at the same time, we can still watch them back. So I'll definitely try and watch a few games in advance, take some notes, do some reviews. As a senior player group, we review different games as well, stopping, starting, watching the tactics, and yeah, so as often as I can do during the week.
That's fantastic, and thanks very much for that, Lauren. And again, just showing sort of the level and the commitment and sort of the questioning and sort of the analysing of the games, which is just so important. Our next guest is Sean Gallagher, who's a top referee, is well known on the Pro 14 and the European circuit. Sean refereed in the last Women's World Cup, which was hosted here in Ireland, and has also been seen in the men's internationals as assistant referee as well. Sean, you're very welcome, and thanks for joining us.
No worries. Thanks, Keener. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Sean, I suppose what I'd like to ask you is like, I mean, what are you looking for from a refereeing point of view, and like, what pictures do you actually, paint when you're looking at the back three in today's game?
Yeah, well, Keener, you would think as referees, when we prepare for matches, we watch all different areas of the game. And I suppose if people looked at it and they thought referees, you think maybe we spend most of our time looking at scrums and lineouts and set piece and stuff like that. But we actually spend quite a bit of time looking at the back three as well. So some of the areas, or the main area that we would look at when we prepare to referee a particular back three, for example, would be around the kick chase. So in a match, when a kick chase happens, there's a lot of things that can happen for the referees on the field that we need to make sure that we prepare for. So before the game, we'd look back at different back threes from the teams that we're refereeing, and we just see what type of way they attack with their kick chase. So the sort of things that would happen is when the ball goes up, the first thing that we need to be aware of is if there are players onside or offside. And we need to collaborate as a team on the field to make sure that we get those decisions right. If we're happy that the players are onside, well, then we have to be really aware of the running lines that the back three have. Do they run directly where the ball is going to land, or do they run lines that obstruct and are illegal? And it can be really difficult for us to do that as referees. So in the lead up to a match, we'll look back at lots of these types of kicks. We'll discuss them as a group. We'll just watch and learn. And if we're not sure about things, we try and get some insight from coaches and players to see what they're thinking. That's the way that we go about that. So we do spend quite a bit of time preparing for back three in matches.
That's great. That's great, Sean. I think the lesson for all players is it's not just about learning the skills of the games, but it's about understanding the laws of the game, and being able to, to be able to sort of work within those laws of the game to maximize your game in case, that you give away penalties or anything like that. So Sean, thanks a million for that. And we may come back to you with a question at the end. And the next presenter that we have is Jonny Gillespie, who has been a talent coach for Ulster Rugby for 5 years. And so he's been right in the heart of sort of rugby development in Ulster. And Jonny, you're very welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Keener. Looking forward to it.
So great, Jonny. So Jonny, you're going to just give us a presentation and just give us a few pointers and tips on in terms of watching games and I suppose from a back three point of view of what to look out for.
Okay, spot on. Afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for jumping on the call. Delighted to be able to share with you, and I know Damien's kind of coming at it from a coaching angle as well. We might cross over a little bit, but yeah, look, really excited to present to you, and fair play to you for jumping on during the day to kind of look after your own development. So hats off to everyone for that. So look, this afternoon for me, it's about noticing bits and pieces in back three play that hopefully you can identify when you're watching some games coming up, whether it's Six Nations, Pro 14, and then try and identify some stuff that you can maybe add to your game, whatever level you play at. Okay, so obviously Six Nations is going to be a superb opportunity just to see what the back three players are up to. I think if we look at these two pictures, we're all pretty good at the picture on the right. We're all pretty comfortable at watching on the ball stuff, the stuff that gets picked up pretty quickly I'm watching with a narrow focus, particularly on the TV, but I'd like us to develop, or at least look at it from the left-hand side picture with a little bit, not necessarily detail, but just a little bit more focus on off-the-ball stuff as well. So obviously on-the-ball stuff, we're all pretty comfortable at picking up, but let's see if we can look at some off-the-ball stuff as well. Just a quick disclaimer, this is stuff that has worked for myself or players I've coached with or our pathway. It's not necessarily the absolute right or wrong, and it's certainly not be all and end all. So the first thing I just wanted you to look at was the fundamentals, or I guess the core skills of playing in the back three. And Lawrence touched on some and gave some really, really cool examples. But I just want you for 10, 15 seconds, think of world-class back three players. And even in Ireland, we're spoiled for choice. But what skills do you think they possess? Or what would good practice look like from their point of view? Okay, so you all have a decent back three player in mind. Just think, what core skill set do they present or have? So from our point of view, we talk about a triple threat. So obviously that's a run threat, picture on the left, a kick threat, picture on the right, and a distribution or pass threat, bottom right. Okay, apologies, these are all Ulster-centered clips, but I know you'll forgive me. So the first one, okay, there should be no audio on these clips, so hopefully you can pick it up. This is just our kick threat. So I guess if we play on here is what it's going to be from transition, so it's a little bit messy and a turnover, but hopefully you can maybe spot. So this is the fullback coming forward now. From my opinion, sure, play it again. From my point of view, he's got a key role in transition. Okay, so when the ball kind of becomes messy or tapped down, he's got a real job to play, just because he or she can kind of, I suppose, see the whole piece of the puzzle and the whole field. And then he's got that technical ability just to be able to drop the ball onto his foot and then win that little chase into the corner. They'll end up getting a penalty out of that. So in terms of cues, you're probably obviously identifying transition. The Leinster defence in this case isn't going to be as well set because they were set to attack. And we're just trying to win that little race in terms of transition. So that's the first clip from a kick threat. Second one, apologies for the grainy vision. So it's more of an attacking kick. So again, it's just that appreciation and cue of, we're probably all looking at on the ball stuff here, but can we also look at off the ball and think, well, okay, if that's where the fullback is, where is there going to be some space that we can target? And on this occasion, it's probably deep in the backfield, which you'll appreciate. You're able to drop the ball onto the foot, so a completely different style of kick. But again, if that kick isn't executed properly with that end over end trajectory, the chances are he's not going to gather that cleanly, and this guy maybe bundles him into touch or stops the score. So a couple of nice little examples of two different styles of kicking and the role that you have within team attack. The next one's kind of combined into one. So again, just watching on the ball for this clip, it's a pass threat. Okay, and it'll come from this guy here, just moving the ball into midfield. So I'm not even going near counter-attack. Oh, I've done it again. I'm not even going near counter-attack, but I just want you to have a look at the run threat and what cues can you pick up from the Munster defence here that allows this guy to make a bit of a line break. Okay, so there's the perfect picture, and I think in our coaching or in our playing or when we're watching, we've got to try and identify these little cues of, okay, well, maybe that's some space that I can get into and execute my run threat. And this occasionally manages to make a little bit of a line break, and then you're into that kind of counter-attack situation that Lauren touched on. Okay, so those are really triple threat, run, kick, pass, and those are kind of the fundamentals that we would look for. Obviously, aerial skills. This is an example of an oncoming kick. So this is a box kick to clear, and Ulster put a little bit of work into how they wanted to get the ball back. So obviously, as Sean has alluded to, we make sure that we're onside. We time the run off 9. We get the appropriate hang time that we can. All eyes on ball. Just a little bit of appreciation of what's around you and get up into the air. And a little bit of a special play from us just to throw the ball back inside and to be aware that we're gonna get the ball back. But this needed to be practiced and needed to be, I suppose, discussed. I would say that these two are probably talking to each other, and there should also be an awareness from kind of chasing players that they may have to go in and mop up any ball that's kind of spilled. But just a nice example of an oncoming catch. This one, probably a live Pro 14 game, so this is just an incoming catch, so it's a decent bomb, maybe a little bit too far. But again, just showing a nice skill set to be able to get under the ball, a little bit of time, and then just to present back, as quickly as possible or as neatly as possible. So again, not to get into too much technical detail, but just eyes on ball, and trying to catch it nice and high. So don't whatever you take from the presentation, just don't underestimate what you can do in terms of fundamentals, and doing those simple things really, really well. So next piece is kind of managing the backfield, and as like Lauren has alluded to, the not necessarily the detail, but the thought process that goes into it and what she looks for from an attacking point of view. Even from a defensive point of view, to me, it is like a little bit of a game of chess, because you're always trying to show a little bit of deception. So if I show this space and I know I can cut it off, can I win that little test, that little battle with the out half? So I've got a couple of clips here. This one is defensive. So what I want you to do is just look at the clip, and then I'm going to ask you what cues. So obviously we're not going to answer this. There's just going to be a little bit of silence. But what cues do you notice in the attack that allows the right winger in this case to come up and shut the space down? Okay, and then we get into a little bit of transition. Just play it again. So what cues do you notice if I pause it here? If you're this player, can you start to think of what little cues you might pick up either live or watching a game that would allow you to go and shut that space forward? Okay, and bear in mind every little scenario is going to be slightly different, but that's just a nice one to consider in terms of what cues you might pick up. And we'll come back to cues in a little bit. Okay, next clip. This one we probably will spend a little bit of time on. So for coaches in the room, and I'm aware there are a few coaches, we would always challenge our backfield players to try and just catch the ball on the full where possible. We don't go into a huge amount of tactical detail or where to stand or what blade of grass you've got to cover. We simply challenge them by saying, look, how many can you catch on a full? And that can be done in training or obviously in matches. So if you just focus off the ball initially on the left winger here, and I just want you to see if you can identify what cues he picks up that allows him to catch the ball on the full. Okay, I'll replay that. And what cues can you notice from the attack that allows this player to catch the ball on the full? So I'll play it again. Jonny. Okay, it hasn't happened by chance. It's decent backfield coverage. He's won that little game of chess. And basically the kind of cues that I'd be looking for, and hopefully like Lauren would identify as well, is first of all, there's no real run threat here. Okay, there are some players, but they're not particularly set to go. So there's not a whole pile of width or threat on the side of the pitch, so he can just soften off a little bit and drop back. He's certainly picked out the depth of this player that's about to kick the ball. He's probably also made eye contact and identified that he started to look for that space. And that's that idea of a little bit of deception where you're almost showing this space, encouraging the kick, knowing that you're probably going to be quick enough to get back and catch it in the full. He moves nice and early and he's able to catch the ball in the full. Okay, so just a couple of little cues that we can start to look for when we're watching matches of what kickers might do or what team attack is set up like. That's going to give us a little clue that gives us a little bit of a head start. Okay. Next one, slightly different kick. It's a really flat kick in behind, and it's a huge, I suppose, transfer of pressure onto the Ulster backfield. But what we'd be asking here in terms of players would be, can you win races? So if you can't catch the ball on the full because this little kick's going to go through on the floor, is can you win a race? All right, so imagine you're playing in a game or you're watching a game. Just notice the kind of bravery that this player, he's just coming into picture now. Notice the bravery that he shows to go down, and then just notice his kind of mindset to get back to feet and then almost win the race to get set again. So if we play on, again, just looking at off the ball, he'll come into shot now. So it's a really good kick. Bravery, win the race, back to feet, simple things done quite well, and then also get a chance to play out. For the coaches in the room, just this is a little game that we play, and I'm to be honest, we're a little bit tight for time, so I'll push on through this. If any coaches want to stay on at the end, we'll more than happily talk you through that. So the two areas that I'd love you to look at and think a little bit more about in the next Six Nations would be, are you a threat? I think one question's come in already about, should I stay with my fullback or should I look to get involved a little bit more? 100% in attack. If it was me, I'd be saying I'd love you to get involved. If you're playing for me, I'd be encouraging you to go and get your hands on the ball. Okay, so if we play this on, I just want you to look off the ball and identify who gets it. All right. So that's not a fluke. That's the right wing for Ulster has come up and popped up into the middle of the pitch. So that's the first thing to notice. If I just come back to here, all of a sudden that defensive picture, or sorry, the attacking picture that Leinster have to deal with becomes a little bit more difficult, because you've got, it's not perfect, but you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5 guys options at the line. Okay, so quite simply, by this guy working off the ball, he's created an extra moving part. And that's probably given Ulster an overlap of some description. Okay, now Ben's not here to defend himself. He obviously tucks the ball a little bit early, and that makes the tackle straightforward. So we can talk about his decision making in a different module. But for me, if he's not there, so if that's you and you're stuck back out in this right wing, not involved, that's going to have to be the 13 in behind, and all of a sudden there's no extra moving part. There's no imbalance of numbers, so there's no out-and-out overlap. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind, is can you get involved off the ball a little bit more? And what I would like you to do is notice if any of that happens in the Six Nations, just ask why. Why is the winger popped up there? It might not be the middle of the pitch. It might be off the scrum half shoulder. It could be off the middle of the pitch. Just have a little look and see where wingers are popping up or fullbacks are popping up and how they manage the space. Okay. Second clip. Again, just notice for me who is the link player. Okay, this time it's the left winger. All right, he's got in, made an extra moving part. Instead of hugging the left touchline, he's got involved. He's a link player. He's an extra moving part, and it possibly should have ended up in a scoreboard. Really good try line defence. Okay, this isn't match footage. This is quite recent training footage, to be honest. I just want you to look at the actions of 13. So it's a run threat, but it's not the same as the 2 clips before, but it's something that we can certainly learn from if we play on. It should pause and ask a question at the end. Okay, good. So we're just looking at this player here. I want you to consider a super strength. Like time and time again, I would see young wingers or young fullbacks trying to take this guy on and getting bundled into touch. Okay, and it drives coaches bananas, it drives spectators bananas, and it drives us as players bananas. So just watch what he does and then consider what effect it kind of has on the team. Okay, so that would be his super strength as a young player. I'm delighted to see him using it on the edge, but just look at this movement pattern and how he gets off the touchline. Okay, and then the coaches in the room can think about how that affects team attack, but we don't need to go into that today. What I would say is I genuinely believe, and we did this with our young players, is this is a movement pattern you could replicate in your back garden. Okay, just get really creative with it. This could be garden furniture. Okay, it could be 2 wide cones, and just practice that idea of having a really good tight late step to get 5-10 meters off the touchline. So that when you do return to training, you're able to replicate that movement pattern pretty efficiently, or a lot better than you would if you didn't. So that's getting involved, and the last part of the presentation is kind of sharing information. And this is the really golden one for me. Okay, so I'll start with the question and then play the clip. So trust me, green 13 and green 14 are out on the right hand edge here. Okay. So my question to you is, what good information could these 2 players give to the ball player? All right, don't worry about the second one just yet. So if we play on, even in training, it's a great opportunity to score, and they're going to butcher it a little bit. Okay, so there's the picture. That's green 12, that's green 13. So just imagine they're outfield or backfield players. What communication can this player or the guy outside him give to these 2 players here that would result in a score? Okay, I know what they said, and it wasn't very helpful. In fact, they actually said very little, but hopefully everyone on the call can identify that this player should go through that space and probably is untouched to score. If they say nothing, nothing will happen. If they score, it'll be a complete fluke. But if he manages this player and this player through the play, then we should score. Certainly our chances of success will increase. Before you think about what good information you might share, think about what bad information you might share, because it happens all the time. So it's probably easier to go bad information first. We'll have 10-15 seconds of silence. Think about what bad information 12 can give 13 or 15 here. Excuse me. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to think of a few. I can tell you a few. So shouting the player's name is a common one, but isn't particularly helpful. Shouting yeah isn't particularly helpful. Hands has actually got limited value as well. But something that would be really useful would be if 12 green, so an outside back, was able to say, player 1, turn the corner, player 2, load that defender. Okay, if you say something, or whatever your equivalent language would be, if you can say something like that, or if you can notice something like that being shown or said on the TV audio, it just makes a huge difference to the players around you, and all of a sudden the chances of success become even higher. Okay, so that's, I suppose, an audio one, or a non-verbal one. If we play on to the next clip. Okay, again, no audio on this clip, so what I want you to do is notice off the ball, so ignore what goes on prior to the line break, and just watch off the ball. There'll be some really rich information shared on this right-hand touch sign. Okay, hopefully you all seen it live because you're watching off the ball. If not, we'll just play it again. So he was calling for it as well, to be fair, but I just thought it was a really rich clip in terms of non-verbal communication, how you can support the decision maker or support the ball player to make the right decision. And you should see this in Six Nations games as well, or Pro 14 games as well. You will pick it up. Even club games live, you'll see little bits of non-verbal communication. And I would definitely encourage you to either practice it or think about it and reflect on it and see if you can add it into your game. And the last clip, I thought it'd be good to go the other side of the ball, is imagine you're this player here. What would you say to this player here? So these are the two players we're highlighting, this player and this player. Okay, so it's obviously a huge game. Clock's gone red, scores a 1-point game. What would this player say to this player? So if we play it on, you've probably got one sentence. You've probably got a couple of words, to be honest. And what I would suggest is you take ball. Simple, clear, no ambiguity, and then both players can just do their job, which is make a tackle and track back and make a tackle. So again, imagine that's yourself, or imagine you're watching a game. What can you pick out? What can you notice about the non-verbal or verbal communication? How has this player shared information with the scrum half coming across to deliver a good outcome? Okay, so listen, just to wrap up, TV cameras aren't always going to be our friend. I completely agree with Lauren in terms of back three, so you might have to be patient and wait for replays. Or Lauren's, I suppose, example of counting the players out is a really good way just to identify who's in the backfield and who isn't. I would also encourage you not to just listen to commentary, be curious, okay, and try and form your own opinions, ask your own questions. If you're watching live, so a non-televised game, just consider some height. I know a lot of the clubs up here in Ulster would have banks and stuff that you can go and watch on just to get a wider view. Or consider watching from behind the posts and try to watch for those off-the-ball moments and see just who's shared information or who's gotten off their wing to get involved. Sorry. What skills can be developed at home? So like for me, this is anything that develops your triple threat, which is the bit that we talked about at the start. So using footballs to pass against the wall, just because the ball bounces nice and squarely off the wall and it's easy to catch. That can be done statically or just on a slow jog, just on the spot, just getting used to transferring the ball at different widths and different depths, and then catching and going again. The kick that you saw at the very start can be practiced at home. Just put black insulating tape on a wall and just practice drop punting the football onto that spot. Once you get comfortable, time to get onto the left foot. Once you're comfortable, time to use a tennis ball and just build a muscle memory of ball hitting, sweet spot of ball hitting the hard point of your foot. The passing on the move, self-explanatory, and then that kind of super strength footwork skill where I showed you the clip of 13 green. I genuinely believe that can be practiced at home whenever the grass is a little bit firmer, a little bit drier. Okay, and then just to my final slide is just my takeaways. Keep an eye on the upcoming game, see what you notice, and reflect on how you can add them to the game. So the first thing to go after is how are players using their triple threat. Be curious as to how players are finding a way to be a threat, and lastly, what do you notice about how players share information in attack and defence? Keena, that's me. Thank you very much.
Jonny, thanks a million for that. Like, the really interesting thing about that is, I suppose, from watching games, it's not just about, you know, the ability for decision making, but it's also about, you know, looking at communication between the players and looking at different situations in terms of what would I say there, or what is the best thing to say to there. So thanks a million, Jonny. That was absolutely fantastic, and really gives people the food for thought in terms of how they can develop their game by watching it. So I'm delighted now to our final presenter is Damien McCabe, who's a former Connacht Interpro, is vastly experienced, has played a huge number of AIL games, and is very, very experienced also in the coaching and the development side, having coached Leinster under-18s boys and girls. So Damien, thanks a million for joining us. And what I'd like to ask you is, you know, what do you look for as a coach?
So look, yeah, thanks very much for having me, Dave. And look, fantastic detail there by Jonny, and great insights there from Sean and Lawrence. So well done to all. I suppose all I can do really is echo a lot of what's already been said. You know, we've covered key attributes of back three. We've covered a lot of detail there. So I'm sure everyone who's on the call will have taken a lot from it. So I suppose for me as a coach, I said it before last week when I was on before, like I would always encourage people to watch the game first and foremost. And then to put ourselves in these positions, you know, as players, you know, what are we actually looking at and what are we looking for, and to visualize scenarios in our own head, whether it be, you know, watching it live, you know, asking why people do what they do, how they do it, and in relation to what would I do or what could I do in those scenarios if that was me on the pitch. So I suppose that'd be first and foremost. Another point that's been made before, I thought was a very good point, was in around that when we're watching games, you know, for enjoyment, but also, you know, try and not have too many distractions around us, and take notes. You know, I suppose a couple of the things I'd say straight up. So I suppose getting into the detail then around kind of, again, a lot of it's been covered, but some questions I would ask my players or players I'd work with would be based around looking at that on and off the ball work. You know, what kind of setups are shown on attack and defence? How do back three use their physical attributes, their skill sets, etc. I think gone are the days when wingers just stood on the side of the pitch and fullbacks stuck in the middle. The game has changed a lot. There's an awful lot of off and on the ball running. So I suppose breaking it into three, just a couple of pointers maybe to look for an attack as a coach. I'd ask players to look at how our back three get into the game, be it from set piece or in general play. You know, how did they set up? How did they align? Do they use their physical attributes to carry the ball, or they use as decoys, etc.? How they use their change up and running and their evasion skills. Then secondly, say on a general play attack kind of scenario, you know, how would they force defenders into making decisions? You know, what kind of running lines do they use to track the ball carrier? Do they offer inside, outside support? Do they stay in the game and look for second and third touches? Or actually do they hold their width and be a kick option threat? So there'd be a couple of questions I'd ask on attack. Then from kind of a counter attack, that transition, kind of as Jonny alluded to, you know, body shape when we're running back and scanning. Where are our eyes looking? You know, do we run with our backs to the ball and not know what's coming? Or do we actually have our chest forward and our eyes turned? The backfield movement, do the two wingers and the fullback work as a three and come closer to the ball and allow the centres or the front field players to fill other positions to be effective? And then what kind of little counter-attack patterns are used to attack the space, to identify the weaknesses, to manipulate the defence? Obviously, it's been covered. We can run, pass, we can kick, etc. Then I suppose in defence, I suppose the little, again, those setups that are used from scrum, line out, middle of the pitch scenarios. Do we, as back three, do we give different pictures to the attack? Do we set up deep and then come forward when the ball's put into play off a scrum or line out, or do we set up flat and then drop back? Play those little mind games. It's been touched on before. General play, do we use that pendulum? You know, if so, why? Or do the wingers play up and a 9 or a 10 play in the backfield? Start asking ourselves, what do we notice and why? So I suppose, look, guys, that would be just kind of a snapshot of a few areas that I'd ask players to kind of look at to kind of aid their learning and understanding. So hopefully that adds some value there.
Yeah, thanks a million, Damo. That's absolutely brilliant. And I suppose for players who watch the game, and it's really also about utilising the experience that they have. Like, I mean, there's vast experience in all our clubs and schools as well, and it's asking questions. So, you know, it's analysing stuff that happens on TV, But if you don't know the answer to it, it's going out there and finding the answer by asking experienced coaches or referees in terms of what your question is. So folks, that brings us to the end of the actual structured part of the presentation. We're going to go into a few Q&As now and ask our guests a couple of questions. But if you have other things to do, just remember as well that we are recording this. So if you have to go now, please feel free, because we will be sending out the recording of this as well. So if I'll get into the questions now. So the first question, I suppose, is for Lauren. And Lauren is just, how can I get more involved as a winger?
Yeah, really good question, and one I've asked quite a good bit over the last year or so since I've transitioned a bit more from full back to the wing position. I think Damien mentioned quite a few bits there in terms of I suppose from our perspective is it's looking at that reload on the blind side, and for me, if that reload is none, then not being afraid to then come over to the open side and see how you can get involved in terms of in open play. I think very often we're just so worried that I suppose if our 10 suddenly comes around the corner and we're not there on the wing for a kick chase, that that's going to be a major problem. But I think being quite confident in that and communicating quite well when you're coming into the line, so your 10 and your centres are aware that you're an out back option and a bit more involved. Having some good communication with different players, definitely, in terms of being an extra option is really important. And then as soon as it comes back the opposite side, get back to your wing as quick as possible.
So obviously I would imagine, Lauren, and I'd say you work on this an awful lot, is communication is key in terms of communicating with the players around you and making sure that they're all singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah, really important. So whether, like I said there, whether you're leaving your wing and you're letting whoever's beside you know, right, I'm gone on the open side, or whether it's joining with your fullback if they've joined in, whether that's attacking or on defence as well, absolutely crucial. I mean, your back three are probably going to be some of your loudest players anyway, on our team, definitely. And especially like communicating forward as well. So letting people in the front line know where they should be going, where they should be coming around the ruck, where the gaps are, where the spaces are, and being the kind of eyes at the back of everyone's head, I suppose, as possible. And I think that the biggest challenge is making sure your voice is loud and clear and yes, I suppose simple bits of communication. I think Jonny mentioned there earlier in terms of really simple. You might only get a sentence out in terms of communicating, but you've got to make sure that that's really clear and concise. And there's no wiggle room around there, but really important, that communication side from back three perspective.
Yeah, and obviously getting that message across and making sure the message hits home. The next question I have is for Jonny. Jonny, could you give us any tips on a defender running at you at full pace, just from a defensive point of view? Just a few tips for the full back if you've got a big winger that's running at full tilt at you.
Well, what an opportunity. What a great opportunity if he's made a line break or she's made a line break and you can own that space. So I would look at it as a positive and not something to be wary of. But for me, it's staying up as long as you can. If you commit or if you sit down in the tackle, so I don't want to get too technical, but if you brace for that tackle a little bit too early, you just hand that player, the attacker, all the advantage. So for me, it would be, can you stay up as tall as you can, as long as you can, and then you try just wrestle back a little bit of control, and then the tackle is on your terms rather than theirs. At some point, you're going to have to get in close and get the shoulder on 100%. But to me, if you get that right and you stay up as long as you can, you'll actually have a chance to turn the ball over, because he or she's possibly running away from support, and that swings the advantage back to us. So yeah, for me, sharing information around you, so just confirm who's got who. And then once you've decided that you're on the ball car, for me, it's about staying as big as you can, as long as you can.
Jonny, thanks a million. And Jonny, we'll come back to you in a minute as well. If you can get those drills that you were going to show in your presentation as well. But the next question we have is to Sean, and one of our audience has asked, can you explain the current laws regarding trying to keep the ball in touch?
Okay, well, I'll give you. There's lots of different ways that players can equip themselves with better law knowledge. So maybe I'll just give one or two examples where players would ask me questions, and I'll just share my screen for one or two really quick clips. So for example, this would get asked to me quite a lot. So if we play this clip through, Jimmy O'Brien puts a kick through, and you can see that there's a kick chase, and the defender, the fullback for Edinburgh, goes down on the ball. A lot of players ask me, do I need to allow that player to get back up, or can I try and jackal that ball? Because oftentimes you hear players say, let him up, let him up. But the law says that you can, if you're not involved in the tackle and you remain on your feet, you can attempt to jackal that ball immediately, and you don't need to let that player back up. So that might be one thing that players question. And then a second example would be, this is a 22-meter dropout. And you can see that England kicked the ball and it goes directly into in goal. And what I often see with players is that they lift that ball and clear it to touch. But actually, if they just jot the ball down without delay, they get to have a scrum back the whole way on their own opposition's 22-meter line attack, which is a massive thing. So how can you go about improving your law knowledge? Download the law book, which is a free app. You can have it beside you when you're taking your notes, watching a game. World Rugby website has lots of resources. Take a video off the TV, send it to your mates or your coach for some discussion. There's lots of different ways that you can pick up those intricacies of law and give your team more options when they're playing,
And it's absolutely so important to know. And those two clips that you use, Sean, are so prevalent and happen so much, and it creates so much questions around. So it is a highly questioned area in those clips that you show. Just going back to the in touch, just can you give us a kind of a basic, just in terms of player in possession, in touch, and actually when the ball is bobbing and someone kicks the ball before it crosses the touch line, or it's gone over the touch line and kicks it back in. Can you just give us maybe one or two quick examples and just verbally in terms of keeping the ball in touch if I'm the winger going back?
I'll just give you one example that players are trying all of the time. So say if it's a penalty kick to touch and it's dropping very close to the touch line, just going out. A lot of players nowadays want to bring the ball back into the field of play. So what does the law say? If the ball crosses the plane of touch, the player has to jump from the field of play, catch the ball, and land back in the field of play. And if they do those three things, well, then they can play on. And sometimes players aren't completely aware of the law, so maybe they might do something like the ball crosses the plane of touch and they jump and slap it back in. And that's where the knowledge of the law would really help players. And I just challenge them. All the answers are in the law book. If you're watching a game and you think, geez, I'm not sure there, pick it up and just read it. It's there in black and white for you,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just such an opportunity, building your law knowledge as a player as well to make you a better player, so you can, use those different scenarios to your advantage. Damien, can I just come to you? Just one of the questions we've had in here is any wide principle to counter attack after a long kick? Like, is there any tips you would give to a fullback on a counter attack?
Look, there's so much out there, so many options, I suppose. First and foremost is catch the ball or secure the ball. Obviously, a lot of us think 2 steps ahead. So first and foremost, when the ball's kicked to the backfield, whether it be to the wing or to the full back, I'd say regain possession. Thereafter, it's relying on that communication, has been alluded to, and work off the ball of our support runners to help them be our eyes as well. And then we can look up and obviously make decisions on what's in front of us, on the pictures that are presented to us. So I suppose we can obviously, if we catch it on one side of the pitch, we can hit the midfield and we can kick to the corners. We could hit the midfield. The wing passing the ball could follow his pass or her pass, look for a second touch and play wide. We could play the ball to the middle and play wide again depending on our skill set, whether that be by kicking or passing. or we could hit the middle and hit back the blind side if all the defenders move towards the middle of the pitch. So I suppose there's so many little scenarios that we could look at, but again, it's getting out, it's practicing and training, developing our skill sets and our and putting different positions and different pictures in place, and then just playing what's in front of us, being brave, as Jonny said earlier on. You know, be curious, but also do the simple things well.
Yeah, like I think there's so many options there that you could go through, you know, a 2 or 3 hour presentation. And like one of the questions that we asked was, you know, if I'm counter-attacking, do I go for the space or do I go into traffic because I got support in traffic, or go into space where potentially I can lose the ball? I suppose that's one big question that you'd kind of have as a fullback. I suppose you just got to make that decision, and you've got to hope that your support play is, if you do go for that gap, that your support play is going to be able to get there in time to support you.
Yep, spot on.
Yeah. Okay, great. So just finishing finally, back to Jonny. Just Jonny, do you want to just quickly show that drill before we finish off today?
Yeah, useful enough for coaches, or if not coaches, you find yourself hitting drop goals pre-session or post-session with the props. Time could possibly be spent doing other things. So we call this grass cover. Okay, I'll just quickly go through the rules. It's a really narrow pitch. You'll probably have seen it before. Your try lines are the 2 10-meter lines. If your numbers are healthy, play full width. If they're not, play 15 to 15. So just get creative. And basically what we play is you've 1 touch to score a try. So black against white, you've 1 touch to score a try. If you get touched, it's a turnover. So straight away you get lots of transition and lots of off the ball stuff. You get 1 point, I think, 1 point for a try scored in the 10-meter line, and you get 3 points if you kick it and it bounces twice in the in-goal area, which for everyone would be the 10-meter line to the 22. So it's a nice deep in-goal area. So 3 points if the ball bounces in there, and 1 point for a genuine try. So it gets lots of off the ball stuff. You get some kicking, you get some aerial skills, and then from a coaching point of view, you can freeze it, replay it, problem solve it. So it's just a really good drill for getting so much backfield and transition and counter-attack stuff covered. And honestly, 5 minutes of play on that, you'll have a decent puff on too.